Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? So we're here, back in Prague Public Schools, abandoned building, in the music room again, the very room that I had music class in, going all the way back in elementary and all the way up through high school. And we're going to make another list. And this time, the list is incredibly important. It was incredibly important before, but we're going to be doing our top 12 albums, my top 12 albums of the decade list. So of course going from 2019 all the way back through 2010. And here, you see I already got my pencil ready to make a list. I'm just going to grab a sheet of stationery, some paper. Got everything set up a little bit this time. It'll be all business. So last time I was in here doing this, it was for my 2011 list. And I loved how that video worked. It was just me sort of unfiltered, unedited, going through, giving you my thoughts and making my list out of a stack of CDs. So here I have 2 stacks of CDs. And these CDs came from a video that hopefully you watched earlier. I guess I should back things up a little bit. So one of my videos I did earlier was I gathered and talked about all 120 albums that were on my top 10 lists throughout the decade. So all 12 from 2010 all the way through 2019. And I made a little spreadsheet chart, and then I added 9 extra ones on there, and I think I actually ended up adding a 10th. So I had 130 albums to go through, and I narrowed it down to these, and I haven't even calculated how many these are. So almost 30 CDs. These stacks look about as big as the stack that I had last time. And so I'm going to go through and try to make my top 12 list. And it's going to be really hard with this because I've already gone through several layers of choosing these albums. Obviously these were all albums that were in my top 12 for that year that they came out, but it was also, I've gone through and chose them out of my top, basically 130 albums of the last decade. This is the top 30. And so I'm going to have to eliminate, I'm going to have to eliminate so many that I know are like favorites of mine. One other thing that I want to mention, I'm going to maybe have to do a little editing while I'm moving the camera around because I want it to be, don't want it to be too annoying, but if I'm sniffling a little bit, it's because it's very cold in here, even colder than it was last time when I was joking about having be able to see my breath, which I don't think you can, but it's pretty cold. So let's not waste any more time. Let's go through some of the albums that we have here. Jacob Dylan, Women in Country, the album that kind of devastated me when I found it came out this decade. The Pierces, Creation, Mook, Miyaku Haku, Kaiser's Orchestra, Volume 3, Violetta Violetta, Volume 3, Pendulum, Immersion, Black Keys, Brothers, I think it's these Hopeful Machines, BT, Demon Hunter, Extremist, Mesh, Looking Skyward, Grace Potter, Midnight, Raunchy, A Discord Electric, Tooth Grinder, Phantom Amour, Gin Wigmore, Gravel and Wine, and then this is where we're coming up to one of the albums that I don't actually have physically. So the band is Legend, but this is their first album that came out in the decade. And the album that I have in this set is their album Midnight Champion. This is their album Fearless. Their album Midnight Champion, which came out in 2017, I think, maybe 2018, is fantastic. And so I'm going to have this as a physical representation of the album Midnight Champion by the same band. This is another one that I don't have in physical form. The albums I don't have in physical form I bought digitally because they were on sale. It was a really good deal, something to pass up. Or in the case of something like, I'll just do them all in a row here. This one is Beyond the Black is the name of the band, and Songs of Love and Death is the album, symphonic metal. And then this is the album Here to Starter by the band Nephew. Again, this is another case where this is not the album. It's another album by the band Nephew that came out 2 years ago called Ring E Ring, Ring-I-Ring. And that album is fantastic, but they don't sell it on Amazon in the United States. It's very expensive, and I could buy it off of a Danish website that I have bought some of their albums from before. That's where this one came from. An album or a website called imusic.dk. It has pretty good prices, but it still cost me like 25 bucks for it. So I haven't got that. So this is a physical representation of the album Ring E Ring. Then we got Within Temptation, The Unforgiving, Hertz, Exile, Jesse Wilson, Phase, Break From This World, Globus, July Talk, Touch, Let's Rock, Black Keys. This is another one representing one. This is the Editors, and this is their last album, In Dreams. Their album before their most recent album. Their most recent album is called Violence, and that is the album that I'm including, but this is just a physical representation of that. Janov, Artisten and Marlene, Evanescence, Synthesis, And One, Trilogy, Raunchy, Vices, Virtues, Visions, and Celldweller, Wish Upon a Black Star. Oh, and then Maximum the Hormone, Yoshu Fukushu. And again, I apologize for the sniffling, but it is rather chilly in here. So, I'm not really even sure how to start this because I feel like I know I'm going to end up disappointing myself getting rid of some bands that I know should be on the list. But there's no other way to do it. We gotta just start. So, I didn't write down the 7 albums. I'll put a little graph here up of the spreadsheet as I finished it with all the albums that are in blue are the albums that I thought for sure were going to end up on this list, and the albums that are in pink are the albums that I wanted to discuss. And I didn't write those down before I came here because I don't want to I kind of want to start fresh with this thinking. But I'll go through and find the albums that I think I remember were on there, and I'll take those and set those aside, and then we'll have to discuss the other ones. If I remember correctly, there were 7. So I know And One Trilogy was on there, BT, These Hopeful Machines, Pendulum, Kaiser's Orchestra, Mook. I think, actually, Maximum the Hormone. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, yes, and of course, Globus, Break From This World. So there's 7 albums that I believe are going to be on the list. So we got, here, I'll get these out of the way for now. We've got Tooth Grinder, Raunchy, Legend, Beyond the Black, Demon Hunter, another Raunchy album, and then we have Within Temptation. This stack, these are metal bands. Then we've got electronic, and I wouldn't call Nephew electronic anymore. Editors definitely are. Electronic. So we've got 3 what I would consider to be electronic albums. Then we have, oh shoot, Janov, that's got to be on the list. I'm going to throw that down there. So I think that means we have 8 now. Oh, which means there's only 4 spots left. Out of this, that's impossible. Alright, so I'm just going to have to start eliminating stuff. So let's talk about a couple of things. Let's talk about these two raunchy albums. So these two raunchy albums, Vices, Virtues, Visions, and A Discord Electric. These are two of my favorite metal albums of all time. And I knew I was going to be coming up with and doing this list. So I went back through and I listened to both of them, trying to figure out which one is my favorite. And I know I could have both of them on my list if I thought that they were good enough. But as I kind of explained in my spreadsheet video, it's hard for me to justify having two albums from the same band on there. And I actually got close with that in two instances. So close that I brought two albums from the same band twice. So I brought two raunchy albums, and then I actually also brought two Black Keys albums. And I'm going to discuss these in a second. But for now, it's about these guys. So, A Discord Electric. I feel like both albums are produced really well, and to me that's something that's very important. How something sounds, the crispness, the volume of everything so that you're able to hear everything clearly but nothing sounds too low. I cannot stand it when vocals are mixed too low in a mix overall. I really think that that unbalances everything. And in metal, unfortunately, that happens a lot because metal bands are usually run by the guitarist. The songs are written by the guitarist. A lot of producers are guitarists. And so the guitars are the main focal point of metal. That's usually what makes something metal. And so I can understand the mentality. Raunchy is a special band because they use electronics, which is something a lot of metal bands do nowadays. But even when they started, they used a lot more electronics than was common back in the early 2000s, leading all the way up to today, 20 years after their, or I think 22 years after their first album came out, maybe even a little bit more, 23 years. I think that they're a really special metal band, and their special quality comes through on both of these albums. I think A Discord Electric I like production-wise better because they have the vocals are mixed up more in the mix, and I think it's a better overall mix. However, the snare drum doesn't sound the greatest, and that's being incredibly picky, but I can be picky with this band because the drummer for this band, Morten Toft Hansen, this guy right here, he's an enormous man who drums and absolutely destroys it. He's my favorite drummer. And for metal at least, I love Patrick Carney from the Black Keys too. But on this album, the vocals are mixed a little low, and I think I know why. It's because their vocalist of the last three albums, this guy, left the band. And so they got a new guy to come and sing this. Well, Raunchy throughout their whole career has always had two people sing vocals for them. Usually a lead metal vocalist who does all the screams and a little bit of singing, and then their keyboard player, who I think's name is Lars Christensen, though there's two guys in the band named Lars, I think, so I get everyone mixed up. But he, or maybe Jasper Strom, anyway, it doesn't matter. Their keyboard player is always also their clean vocalist, so he sings most of the choruses. That's how these albums are. But they got a new vocalist for this album, and he does clean singing too. And his style of clean singing isn't my favorite. It's kind of reminiscent of Patrick Stump from Fall Out Boy. And to me, it doesn't really fit their style that much, but they changed up their style a little bit so that it would work with it. And then they do still have the same vocalist doing a lot of the chorus vocals and most of the singing vocals. I think the screaming vocals are more intense with this guy, but I think that they're just better with this guy. I think the songs on this album, however, are better written. The highs on this album are equal, I would say, to the highs on this album. But the lows on this album, musically, are lower by quite a lot than the lows on this album. This album is a solid album all the way through from front to start. This album is solid almost all the way through. I think there's maybe two songs on here that I don't particularly care for. One that I guess I kind of skip, but the rest of them I don't skip, I just enjoy it. I think the ending song on here And some of the more epic moments on here, some of the songs are much longer. There's 7-minute songs on here as opposed to the 5.5-minute long songs on here in terms of longer, more epic songs. And I think that, to me, it comes down to this is better songwriting, this is better production, but still great production. I feel like this is a much more mature album. This is more of a playful album. I think, and I've been thinking of this, like I said, I've listened to these albums a few times over the last few weeks trying to figure this out. And I think that I enjoy listening to this album more as a whole, but I would pick this album over it a majority of the time. So this album, A Discord Electric, is going to be considered better than this one. However, with everything that I know we have on this list, this album is also going to be put in the no pile. So now let's talk about this. And this is going to be as hard as that was, this is way harder. Because this album, Brothers by the Black Keys, is a seminal album in my life and my enjoyment of music overall. This album got me into a style of music that I never was into. And I'll tell you a tiny quick story about this album. At the time when this album came out in 2010, I was working at a store that sold music, vinyl, all sorts of stuff, called Hastings Entertainment. And I loved that place, and I had just started working there at the end of 2009. And in 2010, I worked there the whole year, and for a large chunk of the year, we had the same CDs in the bin to listen to. And I was one of the people that worked in the music department, and so I would help kind of choose what to put in there when we could listen to stuff. And I remember on the same day, we had this album came out, and the soundtrack to True Blood. I don't know if it came out that day, but we had gotten a copy of it in. And so we put this album and the soundtrack to True Blood, the first volume, in the play bin, and we played it the whole day for like a week. And I fell in love with what I was hearing. And I didn't realize that some of the songs were off this album and they were their own album. They're very similar in tone and quality, old bluesy, gritty, sort of analog-y sounding stuff. And once I found out that some of this, and obviously, you know, you're thinking, what a dumb guy, this is not being able to tell the difference. But listening to it, you know, we didn't listen to the albums in order, we had it on shuffle. Once I found out that this was a thing, I bought it right away, and it absolutely expanded my horizons musically. I think the production on this album is some of my favorite production on any album ever. And I love the drum production. The drums are different on almost every song, and they sound hip-hoppy. They sound like they're sampled drums, but he played them that way. And I think that my drums are my favorite part of this album. However, I do love Dan Auerbach's guitars. This is the album, sometimes when I talk about the Black Keys, I'll reference the fact that Dan uses terrible sounding guitars. Some of the songs on this album, his guitar sounds like crap. Like the amp sounds weird, just unconventional and not really pleasant to the ear, like a fly buzzing or something. However, in combination with the way everything else sounds, it just works amazingly. Then you have this album, Let's Rock, which came out last year and was my #1 album of 2019. This album, I think, is the strongest Black Keys album from front to back. And I think that you can enjoy it all the way through. Whereas this album has a few low points, I think. And Dan Auerbach sings with his falsetto voice on this album, and I do not like it when he does that. I enjoy the songs that he does it on because I've listened to it enough and I grew to like those songs, but I do not like it when Dan sings, "You're the only one," as opposed to singing something from here, which is like, like, that's the style of singing that I like from him. The not lower register, but his regular talking-ish voice, not the falsetto voice, which he sings on here. And he sings on here on like 4 or 5 songs. Now there's 15 songs on here, and there's 12 songs on here. So the 4 or 5 songs don't negate it that much. I think that the best songs the Black Keys ever wrote are maybe on this album. And I think that 10 Cent Pistol, Sinister Kid, The Go-Getter, and Too Afraid to Love You are like some of the best songs they've ever written. And my gears, they grind more each day, and I feel like They're Gonna Grind Away is one of my favorite lyrics of all time. And that song with the heavy beat coming in and the sort of harpsichord thing, amazing, 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 amazing. But there's low points. This album has no low points, in my opinion. Every song is great. It has much more of like a 70s, mid to late 70s feel in terms of how everything sounds and the way the songs are put together. It's a much more happy record, and that doesn't bother me. I like it. I think that I can't think about this right now. I'm going to put it away. So one album that I know is not going to make it that I wanted to include in this, Wish Upon a Black Star by Celldweller. Celldweller, incredible band, mixing electronics and heavy music in a way that I don't think anybody else does. And when this came out, it was his first album in quite a while. I think it was in a decade, because his first album came out in 2001, and this came out in 2012. And this came out and was amazing, but then the guy, Clayton, this guy, he almost sort of oversaturated himself over the last 8 years since then. He has released a ton of albums with a ton of different projects. He has his own record label. Everything on the record label sort of sounds like the kind of music he makes. And he's become so prolific musically that it makes something like this almost less special. One of the reasons this was so incredible when it came out was because nothing else really sounded like it at the time. And it was a culmination of his work for a decade. So all the songs feel like they're put together with a lot of love and care. And I still think he does that and has that feeling with most of his stuff. But his recent stuff has not been connecting with me as much. However, all that said, this album is not going to make it onto my list. But if you like electronic music, you like music that is connected and it feels like it has sort of like a through point. This is like a sci-fi album. Very cool all the way through. Celldweller, look up any of his music, but I'm eliminating it. Opposite end of the music spectrum is the band July Talk. And the reason I wanted to include this in this conversation, whoops, there's their first album, which I only was able to purchase digitally. The reason this album is so special, and the reason I wanted to talk about it, is because you can see right here on the front, this album cover. It's a grizzled sort of man's hand with a more dainty female hand inside of it. One of the coolest things about this band is the two singers and their relationship. You watch them live videos online, and you watch their music videos, and they have this chemistry that is undeniable. But on top of that, it is their voices. The guy sounds like Tom Waits if Tom Waits actually tried to sing rather than just going, which is what Tom Waits does in a lot of his music. But he sings with the most gruff, gravelly voice ever. And she sings with this almost like girl next door, almost childish, high-pitched female voice. And it is so, they are so juxtaposed against each other. It is a very special thing that they are in a band and that they work. And this album is produced phenomenally. It is, again, like the Black Keys kind of blues rock. It is incredible. The videos that come with accompanying these songs, amazing. And I think that overall, their product, their presentation is incredible. They're from Canada, and they are so amazing. But I don't think that they have yet released their best album. I'm hoping that's their next one. And I hope we get a lot of albums from them to come. But this album is great, but not up to par with what I know is going to have to be. I think it deserves to be top 30, which all of these are, but not top 12. So it's going down. So what else is not going to make it onto this list? Grace Potter. This is probably the best solo album from a lead singer. Nope, I can't say that because later on I'm going to talk about Jacob Dylan. But this Grace Potter solo album, produced well, every song written well, incredibly strong from the front to the back, and just great songwriting, exactly what you come to expect from Grace Potter, but more poppy, with less of all that the band elements. There's no really guitar solos. There is guitar, and there are all those sort of like the drums are really what make this sound different. It's not a real drum kit, or at least it doesn't sound like to me. It sounds like poppy electronic drums that sort of sound like rock drums. Songs are all kind of rock songs. Some of them have a bit of a trip hoppy feel to them with some more like sampled elements. The keyboards are really cool. It sounds kind of like Grace Potter and the Nocturnals, but if you made that music with more of a poppy atmosphere intentionally, rather than keeping the bluesy sort of band feel. Great stuff, not going to make it in my top 12. Demon Hunter, Extremist. This is one of my favorite metal albums. It's incredibly solid. There are lows, though. Of all these albums, this might be probably what I would consider maybe number 30, like the last one. Probably shouldn't have included this and included something else, but this album is so strong, so incredible for a band that has a large number of CDs in their catalog. Excuse me. It's so impressive, so gratifying to listen to. The production is the best they've ever had on any of their albums. And I think that it deserves to be in the top 30, but just barely. It's going, whoops, to get eliminated. Now we got Legend. I'm only going to show this once. Remember, this is one of the ones that's a placeholder, kind of. Legend, Midnight Champion. An album unlike any album I've heard before that's like it. It sounds like classic rock mixed with modern electronic, big beats, sort of like electronic stuff. And every song just hits hard. The vocalist is so cool. Everything about it is incredible. The production is so enormous. It just feels so enormous, but not because it's overcompressed. It feels enormous because that's the way that the songs are put together. And I love the vocals throughout. Very catchy, very slow, almost drony. It's very different sounding than anything else I have on this sort of table here. And I think that it deserves to be in the top 30, and it would be close to making it into my top 12 because of how solid it is, but because everything else here is just so fantastic, I'm going to have to eliminate it. So that's Midnight Champion by the band Legend. We're getting more and more hard for me to eliminate something easily. Songs of Love and Death, this is one I don't have a case for, by the band Beyond the Black. I discovered the band Beyond the Black. I heard a couple of their songs and I was like, oh, this sounds kind of cool. So I went and investigated them further and I found that their album was on sale digitally, bought it. It is fantastic. The only problem is towards the end of the album, it falls apart a little bit. But I think the first 7 songs on their album, Songs of Love and Death, are maybe the most perfect 7 songs to ever be put on an album in order, from front to back. Those 7 songs are some of the best symphonic metal I've ever heard. They are a symphonic metal band. And I think that it's just the perfect combination. One of the things that really makes an album stand out to me is if you can look at it and say that it feels like all of the pieces of the puzzle came together and formed this incredible single piece of art. And to me, if a band is mediocre or even good, but they release one album that's just so great, it feels like everyone gave 110%. Everything just fell into place and made this album that just truly stands the test of time and stands above all of their other work, including the work of their peers. That's what sets an album apart for me. And I think that when I first heard Songs of Love and Death by Beyond the Black, that is the feeling that I got. I thought, song after song after song, how could these songs have come together like this? How could this album be so perfect? And then I looked them up and I looked into how the album was recorded and I found out that they had the female vocalist and she got together with some sort of famous symphonic metal guys and they wrote the songs and recorded them featuring all these guest people coming into the studio and calling in favors, and everybody came in and put everything they had into their little piece of the pie that they were helping to bake. And she, and her vocals and the songwriting, carries the album perfectly. The song, it's amazing. Very poppy, but at the same time, just full of all these elements that almost shouldn't even be there, because it's almost like the album doesn't deserve to be as good as it is, but it ended up that way because of the combination of everything coming together. And I'm going to talk about that with some of these other albums too, like just everything coming together, everyone pulling from just the most perfect amount of talent and everything they had inside them to make something so incredible. And that's what the first half of that album is. But the last 4 songs or so just kind of fall apart and don't live up to the standard of those first 7. So that's going to be eliminated. And I don't have it to show it to you again. That's Songs of Love and Death by Beyond the Black. And now we have a ton of albums here that I don't want to get rid of. Here, let me reach the camera. So these albums here are just absolutely fantastic. All of them are. And I don't know what to do about it, because I'm going to have to start eliminating ones that I don't want to. Excuse me for a minute. I want to set this up so that you can see me in it. Okay. I'm starting to get a little chilly. Oh, can you see my breath? Not yet. So, I need to choose only 4 of these, and that's insane to me. So I think first I'm going to have to eliminate The Unforgiven by Within Temptation. I guess I should count how many we got here. 13, I think. 13. So with the 7, this is the top 20. There we go. I eliminated 10. So this is the top 20. And I think the first one that's going to be eliminated is The Unforgiven by Within Temptation. This album is really perfect from front to back. Maybe 2 songs that I like less than the rest of them, but just so perfect. It's poppy, symphonic metal, like I was just kind of talking about, in the same vein, really, as Beyond the Black. But this is just a band that is withstood the test of time, deserves respect from everybody in the music industry, and really just nailed it with this album. A lot of people don't like it, they're fans, because it got rid of a lot of the more bombastic symphonic elements and added more sort of like poppy electronic drums. Her vocals were different, kind of more poppy. I don't think there's any harsh vocals on this album at all, though Within Temptation is not known for that at all. It's a neat sort of concept album featuring artwork and stuff that went along with this comic book series that they helped develop about these sort of people who kind of became superheroes. It's a very fascinating, interesting story, but I think that it just isn't, it's just going to squeak out. Evanescence, no. Tooth Grinder, this is a band, the most recent album that I've acquired out of any of these on this, and maybe I'm hoping that my sort of recency bias isn't getting the better of me, but this album is fantastic from front to back. It's a combination of production styles that I've never heard together. The guitars are Black Keys sounding, but they're playing metal parts, but it's also kind of rock, and the vocals are not afraid to be heavy, but they're not mixed in a heavy way, and the singing is good to bordering great. The vocals, melodies are great. The drums production is fantastic. This album is special because of the way it sounds. I think the songwriting is really good, but what makes it stand out is the production. But even with all that being said, I think that it's going to be gone. This is Tooth Grinder's album Phantom Amour. Another recent album, Jesse Wilson, Phase. This album is so solid, it hurts me. This album is so fantastic. It was made and produced along with Jesse Wilson with Patrick Carney from the Black Keys, and it sounds production-wise just like the Brothers album. And these two albums are so fantastic and very similar. This one has obviously female vocals. Jesse Wilson is the singer, and the guitar playing is cool, though, but it's what it needs to be. The drums are fantastic. Every song the drums sound different. The production is fantastic. Everything about it is amazing. I can see literally nothing negative about this album. However, when you're putting it up against all this other stuff, the special spark, the combination of everyone coming together, the special spark is there, but not as prominent as with some of these other albums. Jesse Wilson, Phase. Not sure. I think I didn't think I was going to do this at all, but I think I'm going to take both Black Keys albums and I'm going to eliminate both of them. I've talked about them a lot already this video, so I'm not going to talk about them more. So I stopped the video to see how much time I had left, and I only have 5 minutes, and that's a problem. Now, of course, I can record more, but who's going to watch this anyway? My problem here is, this is what I got left. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 albums here, and I have to eliminate 4 of them. And this is just very hard for me, very hard. Nephew, their album Ring E Ring is so perfect and so incredible, but it's not very long. Eliminated. The Editors, Violence. Same thing, very incredible, very impressive, but not very long. Eliminated. Gin Wigmore's album is incredible. Gravel and Wine is incredible. Evanescence. This is their album with just orchestra and electronic instruments. Eliminated. Of these albums, it is very hard. I think The Pierces is some of the best songwriting of all time, and it's fantastic. I think Jakob Dylan, oh, it's tough, because Mesh, Looking Skyward, this album, I believe that they have an album that is better than this album. And I think that that album is better, but this album, nope, you know what? Mesh is gone. That means I've got my top 12 albums of the decade. I don't have them figured out in order, but I do have them narrowed down from the 30, and I guess that was the point of this video. So I'm going to end it there. So, from the school in Prague, thanks for watching.